Today I'm honoured to welcome Jamie Burke to this episode of the Future Humans 3.0 podcast show. Jamie Burke is the founder and CEO of Outlier Ventures. Founded in 2014, it's now the world's leading accelerator dedicated to Web3 and the Open Metaverse, where they explore the convergence of finance, media, and technology, and the belief that decentralized technologies would introduce new paradigms for the web and create more equitable and open economic systems. So with a growing portfolio of 100 plus startups and several multi-billion token economies, Jamie is a passionate advocate for the sovereignty of the individual, their data and wealth over platforms, as well as the power of blockchains in Web3. Welcome, Jamie, to the Holoship. How are you?
Hey, great, thanks. You nailed the intro. Best one I've ever had yet. So thanks for that. And sadly, I can't be in avatar form, so I've just got this rather disappointing meat-based representation.
Thank you so much for joining. And I think the thing with the metaverse is it's just as equally important in real life in the meatverse as it is digitally. So that is something I'd like to emphasize as well. Future humans, you're doing incredible things in the space. So I think the best way to start is, do you want to tell the audience more about Outlier Ventures in Web3?
Yeah, sure. So Outlier's been going for over 8 years. We've been different things over that period of time. Obviously, the crypto world looked very different back then than what we came to understand as Web3, and now, of course, the Open Metaverse. And so we've kind of really evolved what we do with that market, with that industry, if you can call it that now, as well as our thesis. But basically, for the last 3.5 years of that journey, we've been an accelerator. And as you said, now we've been enjoying a lot of success with that. And so we passed our 100th portfolio company back in September last year, 2021. I think we're already at probably 135 now, and we'll add another 200 over the course of 2022. So I think that's really representative of the industry as a whole. How many brilliant founders are coming into it, not just those that are native to the space, but also sucking it in, all the talent from big tech, as well as all the kind of younger developers and founders that are coming into the workforce, and rather than going and working at Google, they're deciding to create a Web3 startup. So it's a huge privilege to run an accelerator in this space, because you basically get to work with optimists all day. And you get to help them, I think, at the most exciting part of their journey, where there's all these possibilities, and you're really helping them figure out that pathway, their purpose, their go-to-market, get their first bit of funding, and help them kind of develop that core team and proposition and bring it to market.
Wow, thank you for sharing that, and congratulations on the portfolio. It's a very noble mission, and we're seeing so much talent in the space, from established big tech companies as well as new talent, and that's very much needed as everyone's building the Open Metaverse. And they're saying the Open Metaverse has been built by game developers, kind of like the web was built by web developers. So I guess this is a good segue into your thesis about the Open Metaverse. Do you want to elaborate on that further?
Yeah, so one of the privileges of working in an accelerator is basically you get to speak to lots of early stage startups. Of course, not just the ones that we actually end up working with, but also those that apply to the accelerator. So, last year we spoke to several thousand. We'll do the same this year. And so you don't need to be a genius. You kind of just do some basic pattern recognition, and you start to see some of the trends that are about to come to the market. And because a lot of these startups are early stage, maybe they'll have an MVP. They might even sometimes be pre-product when they start speaking to us. And so it gives you kind of like a 6 to 12 month window on the market, on what's coming to market. And then as we work with those projects in the accelerator, we can kind of see what networks they're building on, what friction they're experiencing, and then of course how they're positioning themselves both to investors, but also users and customers. And so COVID always throws me off in the years, but it would have been 2020. We started to hear the term metaverse used increasingly in pitches. Not a huge amount, but like enough for it to kind of set off an alarm bell and think, okay, well, what are people meaning when they talk about the metaverse? What context are they using it in? And of course, we were seeing a lot of people thinking about the application of blockchain, crypto generally, and NFTs in the context of, gaming, media, entertainment, virtual worlds. And so that led us to lock ourselves away in a room. I think it was December 2020, to try and think about what that meant to us, and to try to look forward into the next decade, and think about what, if we had a metaverse thesis, what would that mean for Outlier? Or what would that mean for Web3? That ended up in call it a paper. I mean, it wasn't kind of like a rigorous academic paper or anything like that. It was relatively high level thought piece on how Web3 could become an operating system for a more open metaverse.
The Open Metaverse OS,
Exactly, Metaverse, Open Metaverse OS, and you can find that freely available on our website. Obviously, since then, I mean, we kind of almost surprised ourselves, to be honest with you, with how timely that was. A couple of months later, NFTs really explode. Facebook rebrands as Meta, and then of course almost every large organization, at least if you're in media, entertainment, gaming, had to have a metaverse strategy and had to have a house view on whether they thought Web3 was part of that or not. And so really that was meant to be like a 10-year thought piece. When we were putting it out, we even debated putting it out because we just thought, people are only just starting to talk about Web3, beyond just cryptocurrencies, like relatively narrow financial use cases, is introducing like a new buzzword, or a kind of even bigger, framework and context going to be helpful. Maybe we don't do it. Maybe we'll do it in a couple of years' time. I'm glad we did do it because, of course, it turned out to be very prescient and it really allowed us to help contribute to that narrative, albeit one narrative that's obviously been somewhat hijacked by big tech. But hey, that we knew that was coming anyway.
I think that's it, though. Anything that's of a high level concept that is new, people will latch on to that, and it's a double-edged sword. I can appreciate that, but I think it's good that it's out there in the open, and open source, so the public can understand this high level concept. I'll just do a little anecdote. How I came across all of this was through Clubhouse last year. And in terms of the word metaverse, I think I heard Crucible, Ryan Gill in a Clubhouse talk, and one thing led to another. So, I mean, I was aware of crypto and everything, but not so much in the space. I've been building with my character, from a visual perspective. You could say that's part of the metaverse since 2017, but this whole Web3 creator economy was a completely new concept, and it was very, very cool reading your papers, which we're going to get into later, to put it all together and understand the Open Metaverse OS and what you're calling MetaFi. So actually, let's just talk about it now. So you have a paper on MetaFi. Do you want to explain to everyone what is MetaFi?
Yeah, I mean, just maybe quickly before I do that, you mentioned Ryan Gill of Crucible, and now the Open Meta DAO.
Yes.
And actually, Ryan was a key part in helping me develop a lot of my thinking. They were technically our first explicitly metaverse-oriented startup that we accelerated.
Yeah.
And actually, when he was going through the Accelerator program, it was just when COVID hit the UK. He'd flown over from LA. With his co-founder at the time from Australia to come work with us in person in London, and it all had to be virtualized. So he was stuck in London during lockdown, had nowhere to go, didn't know anybody. So I actually took him into my house. He came and stayed with me in my family home for several months.
Right.
And during that time, over a few beers here and there, we kind of talk about the metaverse. And that was a key part in my journey. And I think Ryan is a great advocate for the space. He's, very good communicator, very good at framing things. So I'm glad to hear that he was also bringing people like you in as well.
Thank you. Before we get to MetaFi, I would like to add then, do you want to talk about the Open Meta DAO?
Yeah, so I mean, the Open Meta DAO is an initiative by Ryan and Crucible, but of course, by virtue of being a DAO, it's a collaborative effort. And he's really been looking to mobilize the industry as a whole around thinking through standards for an open metaverse, thinking through what a stack of open source technologies would be like to enable it, and then working on some of the primitives. One of the primitives specifically is what Crucible work on, which is self-sovereign identity. As you mentioned in your intro, self-sovereign identity, the sovereignty of the individual in a digital sense, is a really important thing to me, always has been. It's one of the most important things or central to the whole Web3 concept and philosophy. And so they've been doing that, bringing SSI into gaming engines and allowing for interoperability of identity. So that's Crucible, but yeah, Open Meta DAO is much bigger than that. And really it's kind of an antidote to big tech, effectively building these closed proprietary extractive systems, which effectively lock in the user. They're closed economies, and I would argue they're not part of the metaverse. You can't be part of the metaverse if you're just a silo. That just makes you a game or a social media platform or a kind of VR app ecosystem. To be part of the metaverse, you need this be part of the open economic system. And of course, crypto's, I believe, the closest thing we've seen to how you might imagine that. So, so Open Meta is kind of mobilizing those industries, everything from fashion, gaming, media, arts, entertainment, and thinking through some of those like big considerations around what it means to be a sovereign individual, how that individual would interact collectively with other individuals, how they would interact with platforms. Platforms will still exist, but the relationship between the individual and the user and a platform will be different, primarily through the form of digital property rights, the individual owning the value, or at least co-owning the value that's created on these platforms.
Thank you so much for explaining that. And I agree, sovereign identity is very important and key to ownership over your own data and identity. And so how does SSI then relate to MetaFi? And please explain more about MetaFi and its relationship, the complex interplay between non-fungibility and fungibility.
Yeah, so the MetaFi paper, which we released, I think it was late summer 2021, or maybe autumn, fall of that year, was really a follow-up to the Open Metaverse OS. So the Open Metaverse OS really laid out more about how the technologies and primitives of Web3 created this operating system around the sovereignty of the individual, digital property rights, transferability, etc., like a very high-level basis. And then, of course, we saw the explosion of play-to-earn gaming. We saw NFTs being applied to many different types of file format, media, entertainment, music, art, PFPs, effectively a form of social media. And so we wanted to think about how was the open metaverse playing out? Like, where were we actually seeing economic activity? In what form? What types of assets were being used? And most importantly, how that enabled a form of financial inclusion. Because ultimately, one of the things I'm most excited about crypto and Web3 is as a form of financial inclusion. And therefore, the more we can extend that across the digital economy, then the more people that can participate in the value creation that happens on the internet, which currently is only enjoyed by a handful of platforms and their shareholders, not the users.
Yeah.
So MetaFi looked at how these new forms of digital assets, primarily in the form of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, but also in fungible form as well, were becoming forms of wealth, kind of collateral, that could be used in DeFi, DeFi being decentralized finance, crudely borrowing and lending in a peer-to-peer environment, leveraging the blockchain, the majority of which has historically and still happens on Ethereum, but is increasingly happening on other blockchains as well. And so the idea is that if I, as a user, now have a form of property right, digital property right, and I have control and access to this digital form of wealth, then by leveraging DeFi, then I can, as long as I can find one person on the planet that believes that this thing that I have is of value, then in theory, I can borrow against it. I can take out a loan, short-term loan, the terms of which are obviously going to be based upon my likelihood to pay, the value of that underlying asset, and ideally there being more than one person who would be prepared to lend it to me. But in theory, it could just be one person. And so what this means is that all these digital forms of value, if we are able to take the concept of digital property rights into gaming, into the creator economy more generally, then those players, those creators can take this value and they can go into DeFi and they can take out a loan, and they can do that without a bank. And I think that's really important, because if you think about other forms of notional digital wealth, let's say you've got loads of skins in Fortnite, or you're an esports player and you kick ass at one particular game, or you are an Instagram influencer and you have like notional influence, and that can help you derive an income. Well, the problem if it's in a current game environment like Fortnite is we don't own it. Actually, you can't transfer it off the platform. People try to create black markets to make this happen, but ultimately your account can be revoked. So you can be deplatformed, you can be decoupled from that wealth. And so effectively, it's not really a form of wealth beyond that one game, that one platform.
Exactly.
And you certainly couldn't go into a bank and take out a loan, right? It's just not recognized by the existing financial system as a form of wealth. And the same is true for being an influencer in a Web2 creator platform. You go to a bank, you could be making quite decent money from promoting various things, or however you monetize it. But ultimately, the bank will look at that not as a real job. It's not salaried, it's a regular income. It's very unlikely that they're going to lend money to you. And so effectively, that's millions of people with potentially billions of dollars of wealth that is just not recognized by the existing financial system. They are financially excluded. And it's not just a moral point that these people should be, that their wealth should be recognized, but it's just a practical one. Like, how can you have a digital economy where the majority of people can't participate in its wealth creation? That's taxable income. That's a form of GDP and economic growth. And if it's just trapped in a platform and that platform's offshore and it's just avoiding paying tax, then effectively, we have these weird antisocial situations where huge amounts of digital value is not taxed, huge amounts of digital GDP isn't taxed. It's not contributing to the betterment of society and people's lives. And so the principle is that with DeFi and this increasing explosion of digital property rights, that anything that is valuable and digital could in theory now become a form of collateral.
Interesting. That's a very great explanation. So thank you. And I agree. I heard someone say the other day about Web3, it's creating space for everyone. It's creating room for everyone to have a chance to succeed. And that from a psychological perspective is a fundamental paradigm shift from the Web 2 space, as well as what you said, which is so important, the ability, the interoperability, and to take that value and connect it to your own sovereign wealth and identity. So in terms of specific MetaFi projects, I know you're involved with Fluff World, so you're more than welcome to speak about that, or if there's any other sort of projects that you'd like to highlight that are kind of exemplifying these values.
Yeah, I mean, so generally you could argue that almost all of our portfolio, one way or the other, are a form of MetaFi startup, but I think there are some that are perhaps more obviously so. So actually we've got a live cohort at the moment, which is a DeFi specific accelerator program. It's our first thematic one. Normally we do them in collaboration with various protocols and their ecosystems, blockchain protocols.
Yes.
Like Polkadot, Polygon, etc. This is just a pure thematic one. It's not based on any one technology stack. And in this one, MetaFi is a really significant part of the cohort explicitly. So you've got projects like Samaria, who are effectively allowing you to create a protocol that allows you to borrow and lend against NFTs. It's primarily going to be oriented towards blue chip NFTs that have like a more established value,
like
perhaps
Artifact,
a bigger market cap.
Primarily
Primarily these kind of 10K PFPs, like a Bored Ape or whatever. And they've kind of created all kinds of automated technologies that allow the protocol effectively to figure out how you do price discovery, how you set the interest rates, and they've been leveraging a lot of innovations in more general DeFi like Curve to kind of do some really interesting financial innovation there. We have another project called Obey, and Obey are looking at specifically hip hop and kind of hip hop communities and fan bases, and thinking about how music and music NFTs and derivatives of music rights can effectively be traded almost like a stock market, where you can kind of be speculating on the future value of a particular artist or a particular album or single or what have you. Linked to that, there's another one in the music industry called Meta DAO. Meta DAO effectively allow for musicians, both established musicians but also up and coming musicians, to sell their back catalog to fans. So the fans own the rights to that music and can indirectly derive an income from their success, rather than what's happening in the wider music industry at the moment, which is private equity firms are buying up like David Bowie back catalogs and just sitting on them for streaming royalties. And actually music's a really great example of a form, a really valuable thing, a valuable asset, a valuable digital currency that the internet and Web 2 is effectively devalued to the point of it being unlimited music for the price of a coffee each month. Artists, even big artists, barely make a living off the streaming royalties. And they have to find other ways, playing live music or whatever, to kind of make money. But actually with this now Web3 toolkit, leveraging DeFi and DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, there are new ways to generate revenue beyond streaming.
Exactly.
And that value can be co-owned with fans, and that will extend to the kind of wider uh, creator economy as well. And
I
I've got
yeah.
several others, but I'll pause there.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add to what you're saying because I'm obviously in the music space. So Pixelinks as well. And it's great to see for music. I appreciate seeing the fundamental value in the music song asset itself. Because obviously that has been largely devalued from just how accessible and democratized and thanks to streaming and all of that. What I'm also energized about is the experiences and everything around an artist as well, like everything around a music artist as well. So that's why I referenced Pixelinks, because you can bring that into like an in-game kind of system, and obviously I'm interested because I'm exploring the worlds of avatars and what would concerts look like in the metaverse, and what is the role that the audience can play. Are they merely passive spectators, or are they active co-creators in the experience, and can they financially benefit as well? And you can interweave that with storytelling. So thank you for talking about the music there, because I'm very passionate about seeing this space succeed in Web3.
I'll give you another example, just because I think it highlights just how far you can go with this, right? So, one of the most valuable things that happens on the internet are memes. Now, really, the only way that anybody makes money from a meme is by selling advertising around it. So currently, memes as an economic thing only really serve the platforms that they're shared on, because it allows people to serve more ads, or platforms to serve more ads to more eyeballs. And that's it. But of course, memes are much more valuable than that. And it requires a large group of people to kind of collaborate. Memes evolve. So there's actually got a project called meme.com. We started working with them about a year or so ago. And their whole idea is you can capture moments as memes, and as they evolve, primarily in pictorial form.
Right.
So Rare Pepe or whatever. And you can capture points of their evolution as NFTs. It's called marbling. So you basically take a URL, link to that image or that page, you marble it. It creates this little card with this unique marble print, and it has this image at the beginning. And then effectively, they've now allowed you to create meme markets. So you can basically, that NFT is a representation of a particular derivative of a meme. The more earlier it is, if you discover it, you can then kind of buy and trade memes based upon whether you think they're going to have longevity or not. And so this might sound like crazy to most people, but actually people love it, right? Because some people get very emotionally involved with certain memes. Memes are a form of language between and across communities. And so being able to kind of participate in that and speculate on it and actually earn an income directly is an incredibly cool thing. And what I think it highlights is that the power of MetaFi is that you can make all of these things that are intangible, they're not currently measured as economic activity, tangible, actually directly as a financial asset that has hard monetary value, that can help people eat, pay bills, pay college tuition, or whatever else, feed families.
Yeah, it's huge. I'm gonna play a devil's advocate here and talk about gaming. Free to play versus play to earn. Obviously, I see a lot of people see the value in these financial assets and MetaFi as part of this potential in-game system, tokenomics system. But for like pure gamers that just love the thrill of the game and don't want to see it turned into a financial exercise, What's your response to that and that sort of
Yeah, so I
mentality?
mean, I think a lot of people in Web3, maybe who aren't hardcore gamers,
Mm,
were quite surprised by the level of backlash that there had been in parts of the gaming industry by gamers
mm,
and gaming platforms like Steam, I mean even Discord,
mm,
about how NFTs or fungible tokens got introduced into gaming and gaming culture.
mm.
Um, and I think a lot of us did a bit of soul searching there because if you're inside it, it just feels obvious. It feels intuitive. Like, why wouldn't you want digital property rights?
Yeah.
Why would you want? Why would you not want to be able to like recoup some of the time and money that you invest in a
Mm,
game?
mm.
But I think over time, it's become obvious that gaming is its own culture. For a lot of people, gaming is escapism,
Yes.
and perhaps escapism from capitalism and the pressures that they might feel of living in a capitalist society.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea that all of a sudden you're going to introduce this speculative mania into it would somehow corrupt it.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that we've had a lot of um, gaming industry veterans come through our accelerator building blockchain-based gaming propositions, and they'll tell you, actually gamers have been being exploited by companies for a long time.
Mm,
They don't think of gaming as a business,
mm.
but it is. It's just they're not participating in it. They don't see any of the upside from it.
Yeah.
But it's a business, and it's making a lot of other people billions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And so why shouldn't the gamer participate in that? I
Yes.
think it's just the extent to which you introduce crypto and Web3. So I think it's fair to say
Yeah.
that the first implementations of play to earn are not as fun as they could be.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fair to say a lot of people were primarily playing them to make money rather than
Yeah.
necessarily because they loved the game itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some people have been as critical as to say basically play to earn games are a form of yield, just like earning yield in DeFi, but with some extra functionality.
Right.
But I think you've got to remember that this is very early days, right?
Exactly.
Everything in Web3 is an experiment,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody has access to this tooling.
Yes.
And there are going to be some good implementations and bad implementations. We're going to learn and we're going to iterate.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that learning happens out in the open, in the public. And so,
Exactly.
you can learn from what does or doesn't work from Axes and create another game. You mentioned Fluff World. We're really excited. We're working with them on, their kind of whole world builder ecosystem and token economy.
Mm-hmm.
We've got another game called Crypto Walkers, which is like a really fun, genuinely fun zombie killer and
Cool.
battle royale.
Awesome.
And these are like games and fun games and virtual
Yeah.
worlds first,
Yes.
where but with digital property rights,
Yeah.
and where there is the ability to earn an income from your time.
Mm.
But I think it's a point of emphasis, right? I think it's about how you can enhance fun games
Mm.
by leveraging Web3 technology. How can we create something that's all about making loads of money, and then try and make it entertaining and fun, because it's difficult to do it that way around, right?
Yeah.
You need to be a proper game developer and a gamer,
Yeah.
I think, to
Yeah.
make what will be a successful and sustainable play to earn economy.
Yeah, no, I agree. I understand, like, there's a major talent war happening where the best talent is flocking to and has flocked to the Web3 space. So I believe, like you, it's only a matter of time that we will see mass adoption, and especially when we have, like, people from those AAA game developers, and they understand intuitively what a fun experience for a gamer is, and you have the proof of the gamers enjoying the game. We'll see that mass adoption, and I'm curious how you see this, because gaming is COVID proof and it's like such a large economy. I'm curious how you will see this ecosystem compared to like, you know, like an Epic Games, Tim Sweeney, who's obviously very forward thinking, you know, with Fortnite and Epic Games and whatever ecosystem they are developing for the metaverse versus, you know, other amazing AAA kind of Web3
so I mean, it's interesting.
game
Tim
systems.
Sweeney, probably more than anybody, understands the Open Metaverse, but is surprisingly cautious towards Web3. Maybe not surprisingly, maybe he gets that balance between gaming and crypto better than most. But the reality is, today, you know, they've not done anything leveraging Web3 technology. Now, I think if we just kind of go beyond the fact and accept that at some point, you know, somebody's going to crack the formula for how to make a really fun play to earn game that's sustainable. And maybe there are several models, maybe there are several iterations. But I think it's safe to say there's a big enough incentive to figure that out, and there's enough very smart people working on it that it'll happen at some point, right? We'll have our breakthrough moment. If you look beyond that and you look at the production of entertainment generally, but especially a game, we can't produce entertainment quickly enough. We can't produce games quickly enough. We can't produce Netflix TV series quick enough. You know, we're kind of waiting years for games to be released. It requires hundreds, thousands of people, hundreds of millions of dollars. It's like a very risky exercise to finance a AAA game. And therefore not many people try it, right? Now, the interesting thing about the open metaverse, so there's a term called composability, and it's often used when people are talking about DeFi. Basically what composability means is, in Web3, people are effectively building specialist protocols. So a protocol to optimize for a very, very specific thing. But that can be combined with other protocols to form a stack, and in theory can be removed and replaced interchangeably with another protocol if one came along that was better. And so what that means is you've got lots of different teams focusing on lots of specific technical problems without knowing one another, without some form of central coordination. And the output is that you have this compounding effect. Every time, with every new protocol that's introduced that solves a problem, everyone else can stand on top of it and execute. So it's kind of like a bottom-up system of innovation. Now, currently people only really think of composability in the context of DeFi, where, as I was mentioning earlier, you've kind of got somebody creating like a borrowing and lending protocol. You've got some people creating a DEX, a decentralized exchange. You've got some people doing insurance protocols. But actually, composability is true to almost every form of innovation that happens in Web3. And if you think about that in the context of the metaverse and entertainment, gaming, content production, most movies now are being created in gaming engines. So it's almost not worth making a distinction between them, right? The
Virtual
tooling for
amazing.
making a movie and making a game are pretty much the same thing. Now, again, how that happens is lots of people are employed by a big company or contracted. Big company owns all the IP. It keeps it to itself. It maybe develops its gaming engine and evolves that as it goes. But it's pretty much a closed shop. The cool thing with the Open Metaverse, and we've got a couple of startups that are working on this. One of them is called Frag Color, FARG, and then the American spelling COLOR, by a guy called Giovanni. He was an ETH to Ethereum 2 core developer. He also worked in the gaming industry for many years. And he's basically been building a decentralized gaming engine where every fragment, which is why it's called Frag Color, is an NFT. It can be an NFT. And so if you imagine you create a world, and every object in that world is an NFT, and other people can reuse that asset to create their own worlds. They can recombine it. And the royalties of that are handled through smart contracts. So I know if somebody else uses it, I get paid, and I get paid provably through a blockchain.
Right.
What then happens is every time you create a game, well, why would you just use it for one game, right? If you create worlds, characters, objects, wearables, all these different things, why would you use it, like commercially exploit it once, when you can create your game and then you can make it all publicly available for others to use, and you get paid every time they do it. And so what happens is with this, you end up with a like open global library of world building tooling and content. And that then gets really cool, because I then don't need a team of thousands of people. I can leverage work that's already been done, reassemble a game, make a movie, using the assets of others. Maybe I introduce some of my own, maybe I just recombine and reconfigure other people's work and create a derivative. All of a sudden, you've reduced the time to make a movie or a game potentially down to months, if not weeks. And then if you want to really like blow your mind, initially that's being done manually, by people recombining and reconfiguring. But eventually it can be done by AI. We've got another startup going through our program at the moment. The name escapes me because they've just joined. I only met them this week.
Right.
But they're leveraging things like GPT-3, I think it is. I don't think that's what they use, but similar technology, where effectively you can take existing assets and then make derivatives. AI will just keep spitting out different derivatives. And so eventually we can have AI building new worlds from this, just constantly building out and spitting new worlds. From this universal library based on NFTs. And then that's when it gets bonkers, because all of a sudden we then have infinite content.
Yeah. That, that's so crazy that you just talked about that, because that was literally going to be my next question about artificial intelligence and how you see this all playing out. It's very hard to predict, ironically, but at the same time we see trends. So like what you just said just blew my mind, and I can see that happening, of course. And then you've got, from an identity perspective, which is what I was referencing earlier, that you're involved with Fluff World, and they partnered with Altered State Machine and intelligent NFTs in the metaverse, these avatars, and they're constantly learning through, reinforcement learning or whatever, and suggesting, maybe like you said, new financial derivatives. Who would know? But I'm fundamentally interested in this from an ethical perspective, and humans, and the role of how you see this interplaying with the Web3 creator economy. Do you think that this will eventually make human creators redundant?
Well, I mean, I think the reality is that creators, the majority of forms of creation are increasingly going to be by coders. Now, maybe some of the tooling abstracts that away, and it's drag and drop, and you don't have to actually be hard coding things. But I think generally there's already this blurring between creativity, creation, and coding. And so I think once it's people creating through coding, then of course, like very quickly, that can be augmented by forms of machine learning. But I still, see for the foreseeable the requirement for, a creator or a team of creators to direct this stuff. It's not self-directing. And, if the consumer of that thing is a human, then most likely it needs a human creator involved, because the human creator knows the human experience. So I like, to what extent will the creator, the human creator, be entirely removed from the process? I don't know, but I do think that increasingly that blurring is already happening. I'm sure you probably think of yourself, like, if you look in, you mentioned pixel links earlier. I was at IMS and Ibiza with them and Dean and of Dead Mouse's manager, and you know, it's no accident that the electronic music industry producers and DJs are early adopters of crypto and Web3 because they're technologically curious. You know, many of them are coders as well as musicians. Technology is how they make music. And so, you know, I think this is just increasingly the way it's becoming. And I mean, I'll give you an example. So I've got a 9-year-old daughter, and I kind of just watch how she interacts with media. Now, obviously, she's in Roblox constantly. You know, Roblox is her Facebook, it's her social network. Totally. But she would rather watch people playing Roblox on YouTube than Disney.
So cool.
And you know, her favorite form of like drama is actually watching people role play in Roblox on YouTube, again, rather than watching a normal TV series. And so, you know, I think increasingly as people begin to get more immersed into virtual worlds and avatars, I'm personally excited by it. I mean, the ethics of it, you're exactly right to question, because I think we need to be intentional about the world that we're building, especially with kids.
Exactly.
But I don't have the answers, you know, sadly. But I think, you know, these are things that kind of keep me awake at night. But I don't know the solutions, you know, because it's just too complex.
Exactly.
But I know that what's important, and again, like circling back to Web3, is these aren't things decided by a single CEO and a board of directors who are focused only on the share price and keeping shareholders happy and profit motive. I think, you know, if this is driven by communities of people who are intentionally, you know, designing these new digital economies, places of work, places we socialize, then hopefully they'll be more reflective of our interests as users, because we're kind of like user, citizen, owner now.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I was on a webinar the other day with Krista Kim and Pico Velasquez, two amazing women in their own right. And Krista put it very well. You know, she's very spiritual, and she's saying, you know, building the Open Metaverse is a spiritual exercise in its most core fundamentals, because it's like the biggest art experiment in human history. And, you know, it's so important to acknowledge, even though shareholder and prices is important, it's very important to also equally acknowledge, if not more, the ethics, because this is something that this generation and future generations are going to inhabit, and it's going to become their lives and their world. And we need to make sure that humans as well feel empowered. And so I think this is also why I do this show, Future Humans. It's not about losing our sense of humanity in the open metaverse. It's actually about retaining it and bringing the best parts of that to the forefront.
And maybe discovering it too, right? You know, I mean, I think as you're demonstrating here in avatar form, I think it will begin to have us ask questions around what is identity? Like what are we as people? I always joke that with the VR headsets, it's a form of digital acid. You know, people effectively can put it on and off their head and they hallucinate. And it's a form of controlled hallucination. And if you think about the cultural impact of hippies taking acid in the 60s and 70s, they questioned everything. They questioned, you know, religion, society, politics, identity. But of course, you know, doing that through drugs is probably not the most productive way. But if, you know, we've now got a generation, my daughter's generation, that have digital acid. They can put it on and off. They'll question reality. But they can begin to experiment with how they express identity and how they understand themselves, because you represent yourself in this form. You might be able to do it in several different forms based on different contexts. You can experiment and play with identity. And I think the more that you do that, I think a natural consequence of that will be that you can feel greater affinity to people, rather than this highly individuated world of like me now. I kind of generally dress the same. I look a certain way, so that kind of carries with it certain connotations and judgments. You can be unshackled from that once you start expressing yourself in avatars.
It's so interesting. I appreciate what you said. It's the paradox. I'm appearing as this avatar. It could be perceived as somewhat superficial, but at the same time, it's actually very liberating because it's this fluid nature of your identity and how you choose to perceive. Today, I am playing a character in a story, actually, that I've written. And it's so interesting because the word avatar comes from the ancient Sanskrit word, as you know, avatara, which means descent. And so this connects to what Krista was saying. It's one big art experiment for humanity. And, I'm just so grateful and humble that I get to experience this with fellow humans in this really interesting time of history. So I appreciate as well your optimism. And so my second last question right now is we're in a crypto bear market. So obviously this is weeding out the people that are not really here for the right reasons, I believe. And it's also making people reevaluate their mission, and or maybe it's reinforcing why they are here in this space. So what can you say to the volatility of crypto and bear markets, especially when you're a builder?
Yeah, well, I mean, so the reality is volatility is inherent to crypto. Crypto is real-time price discovery. There's no stock exchange that can stop trading if things get a bit hairy. And as we've had more mainstream non-crypto natives coming into the space, they express their sentiment for the wider macro environment through crypto. Often you're pricing in all this stuff that's going on in the world that's nothing to do with crypto. If anything, crypto is an antidote to it. If you look at what's happening in the Ukraine, well, as we've demonstrated, the easiest way to get money into and distributed across Ukraine was crypto. When the banking system collapses, the easiest way for a Russian citizen to escape, how they're currently suffering economically and hedge against the inflation and stuff like that is through crypto. So, ironically, you could say that what's going on in Eastern Europe right now is a great bull case for crypto, and yet it's not been reflected that way. It's gone down, and that's because most people still don't fundamentally understand crypto, and they're just reflecting their general sentiment on the market. So I think builders, creators like you are less interested in that. Of course, everybody likes to feel wealthy. Everyone likes to be wealthy, financially stable, and all that good stuff. But the reality is, I've been in crypto for over 8 years, personally and professionally. And I only see new, brilliant, talented people coming into it. I only see even the incumbents in Web2 now looking at how they can leverage the technology. Instagram's rolling out NFTs. Whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, doesn't matter. It's happening. And so, Web3 is eating the world. Web3 culture and its technology. And so, I'm incredibly optimistic for it. One of the cool things about working in Accelerator is you are working with a load of optimists. To be an entrepreneur, you have to be an optimist. So I only see the bull case for all this stuff. It's becoming more usable, more impactful, and like coming back to that kind of core mission for me and as Outliers around this financial inclusion. So how does that translate to startups? So if you are listening to this and you are a founder of a Web3 startup, or you're thinking about creating one, now is still a good time to do that. There are funds that have dedicated capital that they have to deploy on behalf of their LPs into the Web3 space. That's their mandate, that's their thesis. If they don't do that, they don't get management fee, which is how they pay their rent and the bills, and they won't get carry, which is how they benefit from deploying that capital effectively. Right. So there's billions of dollars of money that has to be invested into Web3. And so if you're a good startup, you will be able to unlock that money. We've got right now 35 startups fundraising as we speak in our portfolio. Yeah. Yes, it's slowed down a bit. Venture capitalists in this space are enjoying a moment where they can actually do due diligence. For the last 18 months in a bull market, it's like you're either in the deal or you're not. You've got 48 hours to decide, and the valuation's 100 million. And they basically have to go in or not, and they have to make that judgment call with no due diligence. Now, in a bear market, of course, VCs love it because they actually get to take time, they get to do due diligence, they get to think about it, they get a discount on the valuation. Things are discounted now in terms of the valuation people are raising out. So it's different, but ultimately it's still there. It's not going anywhere. There's still money available for people that build things that users want. And if you can generate a growth and income and revenue and usage of that network, you will get funding. I think it's just perhaps it's normalizing a little bit more. But I can guarantee you in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, there'll be another bull market. Everyone will be distracted again. It'll be crazy. This just happens. It happens every year. Now it's almost every year. Prior it was you'd have a couple of years, break between like 2017, 18, 19 winter. Now it happens almost, yearly, sometimes twice a year. We've had last 12 months, 2 corrections of over 70%, right? And it's gone up, gone back up every time.
Yeah, that's true. And what I appreciate about the bear market space, besides weeding out the bad actors, is also people have time to build and focus. It's not as noisy, obviously, when it's not a bull market. And so that's great because you can really focus on your why, your mission, your product, your audience, what value you're going to bring to the space. So I think, the perfect way to end is where can everyone find more about you and Outlier Ventures?
So I'm mainly on Twitter. You can find me personally at Jamie247, JAMIE, and then the numbers 247. You can find Outlier Ventures at outlierventures.io. You can apply to our Basecamp Accelerator program, which is outlierventures.io/Basecamp. We're pretty much always recruiting. I think right now we've got 4 cohorts live. We're recruiting for another 3 for the next quarter. And you can apply at any stage. So it's never too early. We might not be able to work with you straight away, but we can certainly try to talk to you and keep in touch until the time's right. But we're here and dedicated to Web3 builders. We're doing it for 8 years. We'll accelerate 200 startups this year, whether it's a bull market or a bear market, it doesn't make any difference to us. And hopefully we get to do this for another decade.
It's fantastic. So thank you so much, Jamie, for joining us today on the Holoship.